Welcome back to a live episode of Spittin Hoops. Here we are in person. This is our first in-person show, so just work with us. We might have some technical difficulties. You might see some different camera angles, but we're here. We're here in person. Yes, sir. Finally. Yes, sir.
Yo, had to make it happen for the culture. What's up? What's up? How we doing?
Yes, sir. Okay. We got some exciting stuff, obviously, to talk about today. The NBA Finals wrapped up, and you haven't seen us since the NBA Finals. So first, we want to apologize for that, but also I feel like pretty straightforward NBA Finals, to be honest. We're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about a few other offseason topics that have been kind of floating around. Obviously, the offseason is in full effect now. And yeah, that's basically what we're gonna be doing. We're gonna have a few live episodes for you guys, hopefully, and hopefully you guys enjoy them. Anthony, you got anything else to add?
Yeah, let's get it, baby. Finals was great, fun finals, competitive even though it was short. And then the second the finals is over, offseason begins just like that. So we got hell stuff to talk about.
Well, yeah, we got a ton of stuff to talk about. So first, obviously, let's get into the NBA Finals. I'm sure you guys have all been seeing Nikola Jokic has been partying, listening to a lot of Soulja Boy and a lot of Sheck West. Although he said he wasn't going to enjoy the parade, he is clearly enjoying all that stuff. He basically has an all-time NBA Finals. The Heat are only able to win Game 2. Jokic ends up averaging something like 30, 14, and 7 on 60% shooting from the floor and 40% shooting from 3. All-time performance from him. And the Nuggets, a well-deserved championship. You know, I personally have not always given them the credit they deserve, but they absolutely deserve all the credit in the world right now.
Unbelievable championship for them. Congratulations. First one in their entire franchise history. I think that knocks off one of the longer streaks. There's no. Not only did they reach their first finals, they reached their first championship. Like you said, Jokic was absolutely incredible. First duo of teammates between him and Jamal Murray to average 25, 5, and 5, I believe. Mm-hmm. So they were in the finals. Was it the finals or was it
in the playoffs?
In the playoffs. So even bigger sample size.
Yeah.
So crazy, great finals. I think I said Nuggets in 6. I was off. It was Nuggets in 5. But I think we'll get into why that went the way that it did.
Yeah, and on the other hand, I took Heat in 7. But I think in our preview show for the finals, we did outline a lot of the things that needed to happen for either team to win. And to be honest, the Nuggets did a lot of the things that I previously criticized them for. They reached deeper into their bench. Christian Braun ends up playing more minutes than Jeff Green does, when Jeff Green, for the whole previous series, had played more minutes than Christian Braun. And Braun was great. The Heat, for some reason, couldn't figure out how to guard him. He was just another cutting option who was really active. And things like that really ended up being the difference makers. Aaron Gordon having some big games while Michael Porter Jr. actually didn't. And it really worked out. Defensively, they looked great. Probably as good as every other team that the Heat have played defensively, which was a shock to me.
Oh, yeah. They figured it out pretty quickly what to do against the Heat. And that definitely set the tone. Like you were saying, Christian Brown, by the way.
Brown, yeah, my bad.
It's weird because Braun. But he went off. Was it Game 3 where they needed him? Yeah. And he scored 15 points on 8 of 9 shooting. Just kind of played in a similar way that the Heat played, where the Heat, they like to do these drives and kind of played like Jimmy Butler against Jimmy Butler. So he definitely set the tone, but it was guys like that, like Bruce Brown. MPJ finally stepped up in that final game when it seemed like nobody was hitting shots. I think the Nuggets started out 1 of 17 from 3, which is really what the Heat wanted in their playbook. But then one of the biggest criticisms that even I was on them for was their defense. They just locked it in, and they were able to really hold them off. And while all that's happening, Nikola Jokic, I think 12 of 16 in the closeout game, 28 and 16 as a stat line. Just unbelievable.
Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, in my opinion, deserve the most credit for this series. They were the two best players in this series. Jamal Murray ends up averaging 21 points a game, 7 rebounds a game, and 10 assists a game, I believe, in the finals specifically. So basically they have Jokic, who's averaging 13 and 15, and then Jamal Murray averaging 20 and 10. at some point, like, it's going to be hard to beat.
Yeah.
I think an underrated aspect of the series, I don't think the role players of Denver were as impactful necessarily as we might think they were. Aaron Gordon averaged something like 14 a game. Bruce Brown only averaged something like 11 a game. And MPJ only averaged 9 a game in the finals, right? But having that always an option of someone who did step up, in the final game when other people weren't stepping up, MPJ did when he hadn't played well all series. You're able to do that, right, when Jokic and Jamal Murray are combining for basically 60 points to 70 points created a game. But I thought they specifically deserve as much credit as anyone. I know it's easy to say let's credit the best player in the league, but we really should. Those two guys specifically were unbelievable throughout that whole finals, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely unbelievable throughout the entire playoff run. And this is why it seemed hard for me to kind of have this series in doubt. The Heat were a fantastic team, but at the same time, I don't even think that they were the toughest team that the Nuggets had to play. I think the Lakers would have given the Heat some trouble too. I don't know who I'm going to say was better between those two, but they just kind of kept rolling, man. Like they didn't really slow down for anybody.
I think it's like pretty convenient to say that though. Like after 4 rounds, I think the Heat also had a bad schedule, which going into the finals, I thought the scheduling of the finals games themselves was going to help them win one of the first 2 games, which they did. But in terms of scheduling, like Denver had basically 10 days off before they had to play in the finals, which I'd like to believe had the Lakers pulled out that series somehow against the Nuggets in like 7 games, they probably would have been a lot worse, performing. But that's also all in retrospect. I also think Jimmy Butler was just not at the same level that he was in the previous series. Ends up scoring 20 a game on 40% shooting. Just not good enough, to be honest. And like I said, Jamal Murray was better than him for this whole series. So I think it's difficult. Had the Heat been playing up to their standard of basketball like they did against the Celtics, I think they would have beat the Lakers in 5 games. Had they played like they did it against the Nuggets, maybe it goes differently. I think it's pretty speculative.
And had the Heat played the way that they played against the Celtics like they did against the Nuggets, maybe the story of Heat in 7 actually happens.
Yeah, exactly.
I was looking at some of the 3-point discrepancies from the finals and from the series against Boston, just to ruminate in my misery. But Caleb Martin, 49% from 3 and 60% from the field against the Celtics. Against the Nuggets, 33 and 38%. Let's look at Gabe Vincent, 52% from 3 and 48% from the field overall. Against the Nuggets, 33%, 38%. So the percentages just drop off pretty consistently for a lot of the big role players across the board. And it was just things like that. Even Max Strus, who had a pretty solid series against the Celtics, just could not find it in the finals. So a lot of their role players who need to step up, they just weren't able to. Maybe they ran out of gas. Maybe they kind of regressed back to the mean of why they only won 44 games in the regular season. But like you said, I do think this has a lot more to say about how great Jamal Murray and Jokic were. Just in the fact that a lot of those games were relatively close towards the end. And then it was the best 2 guys on the court who were able to pull away.
Yeah, and I think an underrated part also of the Nuggets and those 2 guys again specifically, I thought Jamal Murray, and I think I talked about this in the preview, I hope I did. I thought he's been really terrific this whole playoffs defensively. Jamal Murray has been. He's not super physically imposing. He kind of needs to be an effort-based defender as much as he does have good defensive qualities for a point guard. And he was great defensively in the finals. Obviously, having Bruce Brown and Aaron Gordon helps, who, I've been an Aaron Gordon hater for a while, but he was great defensively in the finals. I can't take anything away from him. But I thought Jamal Murray, specifically defensively, after, also averaging 20 and 10 on the offensive end, playing good defense on the other side, is a really huge deal. I think sometimes on the Celtics, for example, when you see some of the bigger guys like Tatum and Brown having huge offensive nights, their defensive output might not be there. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something Jamal Murray was actually able to do really well. that's kind of a stray at the Celtics. I'm sorry, but that was just something I was kind of sitting on. I feel like as much as like Jalen and Tatum are great two-way guys, sometimes that can take away from each other. When Jamal Murray was like, okay, I'm going to be great offensively, and I need to hold like a certain level of defense.
Yeah,
and we're going to win.
Yeah.
And Jokic, honestly, same thing. Jokic ended up averaging, I believe, a block and a half and a steal a game in these finals. He's come a long way from being the defensive liability we thought he was 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of like Curry got a lot of that flack early in his career and then became an average to solid defender, and I think that's what Jokic did. That's what they need to do to win these finals. They weren't going to go in and just have a shootout against the Heat. The Heat kind of flip-flopped in their series against the Bucks, and then the Celtics, they shoot crazy well against the Knicks, and the Nuggets, they don't shoot so well. So this turned into a rock fight pretty quickly, so the Nuggets need to be able to adjust how they play.
Do you think the whole Tyler Hero thing had anything to do mentally with the Heat? Do you also think it was kind of just chalked either way? I thought that situation was a little interesting because we heard like Game 3 and then it was like Game 5 and then... Yeah.
And then he never played.
Yeah.
What, in terms of like him being a distraction for the Heat? Or?
Either a distraction or even had he had played, I mean, I think that would have been a good... He ended up being a decoy. But kind of a useless decoy. I mean, you're down 3-1.
Yeah.
If you're going to pull that move to have him warm up and just sit on the bench the whole time, were you kind of just better served doing that in Game 4? A little bit. That's just kind of my thoughts there. I thought that situation was a little peculiar.
It didn't help them, for sure.
Yeah.
Unless he was completely healthy and he could have played, I don't think it really made much sense to risk him in that game where you're clearly not going to win. But I'd also seen something about... Part of the reason why he didn't want to join the roster again or start playing with them was because he didn't want to get them out of their flow. But, like, flow was gone.
Yeah.
Like, you might as well bring your 20 points per game guy back.
Yeah, I think that's like I hope that's not why they held him out, because I think in general it's kind of like a flawed logic. Like, I don't want to hurt my team by adding another good piece to something that's working. But, like, if it's working, like you know, it's going to be easier to embed yourself into the squad, right? So, I think that... I hope that's not the reason why they held him out. I don't think it is. But I thought that was interesting. I thought that was very... And given the playoff run, I mean, they were better without Tyler Hero than they were with him, which is easy to say, but also the gap between the two versions of the Heat, one with Tyler Hero and one without, was so big.
Yeah.
Like, the version of the Heat with Tyler Hero was barely making the playoffs. The version without him made a finals. I'm not saying Tyler Hero is a bad player, but it's just, that's definitely, now you can ask yourself questions and ask yourself, is Tyler Hero expendable in a trade?
And he very well might be. He very well might be. He might be one of the worst players I've ever seen in my band. Keep it a buck with you. 20 points per game in this league? Nah, for real. I think they could have used him for sure. They could have used that shooting for sure in that final game. Like, who knows? You push it to 6. Denver could have gotten tight. Denver looked tight in the beginning of that game because, you know, you're nervous. You never won a chip before in your entire career. And I know Jokic kind of got out of that, but you could tell with the rest of that team, they were a little bit tight shooting there. Like, damn, we got a whole franchise in our back to win a chip for.
I totally agree. I thought, I mean, they hit clutch shots, right? But I almost felt like the Heat... I felt like there was a little bit of regression in the mean. Like, the Heat won all these close games by hitting these crazy shots for the whole playoffs. Yeah. And I feel like by the end, the Nuggets, I feel like specifically in Game 5 a few times and in Game 4, they kind of had openings where, the Heat had openings where maybe against the Celtics they would have taken advantage.
Yeah.
Had they been still shooting 60% from 3 with Gabe Vincent and Caleb Martin, right? But... they didn't, and that's credit to the Nuggets too for preventing that from happening. But I feel like there was also a little bit of regression to the mean sort of vibes. I've always said that Jimmy Butler, I think, can be a top 10 player, but he can impersonate a top 5 player for like 3 weeks. They got their 3 weeks of top 5 player Jimmy, and now he's probably going to go back to being what he was for the regular season.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I mean, he sort of played in the finals and even against the Celtics the way he did in the regular season.
Yeah.
Got a bit masked. People argue that Caleb Martin could have won that Eastern Conference Finals MVP. I don't know if I'd say that, but he played absolutely unbelievable, and then he was kind of gone for the rest of the finals. So when you don't have Jimmy carrying those guys, that deep bench won't really take you too far.
Yeah, I totally agree. I guess now we'll move on. I feel like we did a lot of that, and we're also going to talk about the future of the Nuggets coming up in a future section, to be honest. But I did want to just say about the Heat with their future. I think Jimmy Butler's getting underratedly old. Contracts are going to start. They're going to need to start paying people. But they do have the assets to add a player, which is kind of scary considering they just made a finals. But I think that's going to have to be the avenue. I don't see, even if Tyler Hero comes back and this whole same team comes back next year, you're not going to see me picking them to be a top 3 seed in the East probably, which might be a little disrespectful, but also they were basically a 500 team for the whole regular season. They're definitely a team that performs better in the playoffs, but yeah.
Yeah, they perform better in the playoffs, but you are eventually, in 4 rounds of game, you are going to come up against a team that has A, more talent, and B, more heart, and that was what happened. Took them 4 rounds to get there, but they finally got against a team that was just too powerful to overcome. Max, do you have a list of some of those assets that they have that they could fiddle around and trade with?
Yes, I mean, honestly, it's pretty much Hero, Gabe Vincent, who's I believe RFA this year. You could eventually trade him or sign and trade him. But I think the most likely route is Duncan Robinson's getting paid basically around $20 million a year. And that's kind of a good middling salary to be able to match contracts for a better player.
Yeah.
Let's say Dame signs an extension and his salary goes up to 40 to 45. Duncan Robinson and Tyler Hero's contracts put together, boom. Now you just start adding first round picks.
Right.
So they have assets to trade. Kyle Lowry as well, very tradable contract. So I would be honestly shocked if they didn't make a trade because there's so many tradable guys. And Strus is a free agent. Gabe Vincent, RFA. Like I said, Caleb Martin next year is a free agent. The money's going to start coming, so why not try to win before the money comes, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah. Or the money, the bill is going to come.
Yeah.
They're basically going to have to pay up for all these performances.
Right. Because we see a couple of years ago they'd beaten the Bucks, and then the next year they got swept in the first round.
Exactly.
They are capable of these great performances, but at the same time they are way more mortal than the average team. What's up? Technical difficulties.
Yes, sorry.
How y'all doing? But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Miami's popping, right? Shout out Messi to Max's right. But
oh yes, he's up here somewhere.
Yeah, behind.
To my left, actually.
To your left. Oh yeah, to the right on the camera. Yeah, on the camera. Yeah.
Oh, I guess it would be to the viewers, right? Damn, you
to our lovely viewers.
Yeah, you got me beat there, actually.
Yeah. He was looking left, but Messi looking right. But I think, who's a guy you would like to see the Heat trade for?
To be honest, I think Eric Spoelstra's a god, right?
Yeah.
So I need to first of all put that out there. There's a lot of offensive-centric players that I would love to see go to the Heat that I wouldn't otherwise like to see go to many other teams because of that. So if you were just able to play with Gabe Vincent and Kyle Lowry out there on the court, if you can get Dame Lillard to Miami, they're not going to get worse defensively. Is Dame Lillard a worse defender than Gabe Vincent? They're probably as good as each other defensively, and then who's better offensively? It's Dame Lillard.
Right.
So I think that would be my dream move, would be Dame Lillard to Miami. It's also 2 fringe, basically top 10 guys teaming up with their guys that also elevate their teammates in terms of mentality, performances, culture, like that. Maybe not guys that elevate them in terms of stats, but I would love to see Dame, basically. I think it's a great fit. I think
that's a great fit. I honestly, that's the only fit that I think that's the only trade that I can envision that is likely to happen. That's a name that's going around that would make sense for the Heat to bring in. That would put them into a, you guys are going to win the championship this year kind of category for me.
Outside of that, there's been other trade discussions around the NBA, specifically Zion Williamson. Never-ending rumors with him, and sometimes not just rumors, and the sources confirm it themselves on Twitter, if you know what I mean. There's a reason Zion likes Dallas. But the rumor on the block kind of was that the Pelicans are shopping and trying to get to the pick, whether that be the second overall pick or third overall pick, to get Scoot. I think it's a great fit. Scoot in New Orleans, I think, is a great fit. He's not a shooter, which is always it's not something I love because I think all of New Orleans' best players are not like A++ shooters or even A- shooters, to be honest. But a Zion for the number 2 overall pick trade. Yeah. If I'm the Pelicans, I can't do it, right? You know, the peak of Zion is too good. But maybe it's Brandon Ingram.
Yeah. Is there a package that you can kind of put around that to get that number 2 pick? I mean, because also thinking about Zion, I mean, the off the court stuff is funny. He's goofy for that, and I don't know why the way that he operates is just hilarious as a figure. But at the same time, it's the injuries. I mean, nothing has really come to suggest. Talking about that off the court stuff in some of those text messages, the females are talking about his weight. And if you got the woman that you're, having your conjugal times with talking about your weight, that's a pretty good sign too, on top of things. So if that hasn't suggested that he's slimmed down, I don't need Zion Williamson healthy for 30 games every single year. So I don't know.
Yeah, and
it's tough.
It's tough, but like, even if he could rebrand his game style to almost be a little bit more, because he was running point forward a lot of times, like where he's bringing the ball up, and it's great conceptually, and I think in an ideal world that's his best role, but realistically maybe change his play style a little bit more to a classic power forward, like the ideal stretch power forward kind of. I think Zion can kind of become that. Also a better defensive player would be ideal, but it's a little unfortunate that we're talking about rebranding a player that put up 27 a game in like 50 games in his second year, right? Which is like pretty depressing. If I'm New Orleans, I can't trade that man. That's the issue.
Yeah, I mean, you can't trade him, and he is tradable.
He is trade. That's the thing. He's very tradable, but I would be a lot more. I would want to trade as much as Brandon Ingram is really good. He probably just had his best season of his career. And we've still seen, even within that context, he can't really fit with Zion. I would be much more inclined to trade Brandon Ingram than Zion.
Who's also been dealing with his own injury concerns during this past season. So, I mean, if you can get off BI I might want more than just the number 2.
Oh, really? I think Charlotte might ask for more.
I think Charlotte asked for more than...
Well, if you're Charlotte, I just kind of feel like if they go up to you and they offer BI, they want that number 2 bad. And at some point, they're also trying to get out of the BI situation. Because I think the nice part about trading for the number 2 pick, even if you do BI in another first, like, you can go to your fans and say, oh, we got Scoot and whatever, like, right? And I think that's something, like, narrative-wise, that is also good. Because trading Brandon Ingram, who just averaged basically 24, 25 a game on great shooting this year, like, it's a hard sell to your fans, who also, the Pelicans fans, from what I've seen on Twitter, they love Brandon Ingram.
Right.
Like, they love that guy.
Yeah.
So they don't love Zion Williamson.
No.
So there's that. But.
Well, and I've seen the report, I think it was Windhorst that talked about Zion and the Pelicans, and even other Pelicans teammates, they don't really have a relationship. They don't have that connection. So if we're talking about, I mean, raw talent, of course Zion is the best player on that team. Like, you want him. And at the same time, what's the culture that you're trying to build going forward?
It is a report by Brian Windhorst, who, is dubious at best at times. But
he do be dubious.
But I did see that report, and I did think it was interesting, especially if we remember correctly during the exit interviews that the Pelicans had with the press. CJ McCollum kind of just subtweeted Zion, and it was like, we need people available because we have a good team, we have shooters, we have like dudes who are nice, and then we play together for 10 games and try to walk into a playoffs. Like,
can't do it.
Now we have the Bucks to talk about, which they're in a weird spot. I talked about this previously, that I think they have a chance to never make a finals again with this core. That I've talked about previously, I think on our episodes multiple times. And I think it's going to happen sooner than we think. Middleton's kind of up there in age. He's been hurt, and even in the playoff run where they won a chip, he was, terrible for 50% of the games, and he was amazing for the other 50%, right? But Jrue Holiday is really the main piece there that I think that they are focused on keeping around Giannis.
Yep.
I think everyone else is kind of expendable. Whether that's Brook Lopez, who can't switch, which we told you about in our Defense Player of the Year podcast, and I said he was going to get exposed in the playoffs. What happened? But
expose him.
Yeah, come on now. But I think it's going to be really interesting to me because Grayson Allen isn't good enough. Like, they don't have auxiliary pieces who are that good that they trust. I think Javon Carter is really good. I don't think they trust him like that. As much as, again, I think he is really good. I think he should get more of an opportunity. Mm-hmm. I don't think they're willing to give that.
Yeah.
And I don't think they trust Grayson Allen either.
Right.
Or Middleton's health.
Yeah. I mean, they got more questions than they do answers.
Absolutely.
I always say, with the NBA, you never know. You can never tell. I wonder what would have happened if Giannis hadn't gotten hurt in that first game. I am curious, just because maybe he could have elevated them. He had crazy good stats, even though he had gotten injured. But yeah, like we saw, there were some issues there.
I'm just saying the one game that they won was without Giannis.
Yeah, it was out.
Right, so that was also a fool's gold game because then they felt like they could hold Giannis out for the next game.
Yeah.
And that kind of, I think, screwed them too, like the timing. But Giannis also has question marks, in my opinion. His health, his play style is also a very physical play style. I never imagined Giannis would be a guy to play into his late 30s anyways. Mm-hmm. So now you're really going to start having to compensate heavily for that. I think we see a lot more of Giannis as a true center coming up, to be honest. But a trade that I personally have been thinking about in general is just a Middleton for auxiliary pieces of some sort of trade. So let's say, this is a horrible example because I'm coming off the top of my head with this, but like to the Rockets. The Rockets want an adult in the room. You go, here's Middleton. We'll take Kevin Porter Jr.'s partially guaranteed contract. We want Tari Eason, and maybe we want someone else. I don't know, Jayshawn Tate. And maybe you flip some of those pieces in a first that you get in that trade for someone else. But I think they need shooters. They were smart in the roster construction. Brook Lopez as a roster construction piece, like a 3-point center who can theoretically play defense is like a great idea to put next to Giannis, spacing wise. But their guys like that aren't that good. Brook Lopez isn't that good. Grayson Allen isn't that good.
Yeah.
As much as that's the profile player you want.
Yeah. And they just need better, good players. And I think they'll pick up some guys over the offseason. Mm-hmm. So I'm excited to see who they look for to find. And they need more youth for sure. And they need better shooting. So there's a lot of issues that they cover.
They picked this guy out of the G League last year, Margin Beauchamp. He's a bigger, small forward, can kind of shoot, kind of play defense. I expect he'll get more minutes next year, and I don't expect him to leave in a trade. But I think those are the guys you're kind of hoping end up doing well while you're trying to win a chip with Giannis. It's not an ideal situation. There's not that many defined roles, or even ideally defined roles. Mm-hmm. Coming off of a first-round exit like that. What, 2 straight first-round exits?
Yeah, 2 straight. No.
Last year, second round.
Yeah. Well, that was the year everybody thought, of course they'll be fine because Chris Middleton was hurt and he pushed the Celtics to 7 and had an unbelievable playoff run in his own right.
And maybe I'm out on Chris Middleton early, I will say, and maybe the Bucks just say we got to keep him, and we can do moves elsewhere.
He did just get surgery to fix some of that lingering stuff that he'd been dealing with, and he had been a pretty consistent 25-5 type of guy for 5 straight years. So I'm wondering, maybe you don't try to look for guys who can replace both Brook Lopez and Chris Middleton, but maybe just one of them. What can you get for I'm trying to think, is there a team in the West that is looking at their roster thinking we could use a backup center to help against Jokic, or something? I mean,
maybe honestly, you call up the Warriors and you go, we think this is again not a great example, but we have Brook Lopez and we have a few other bigger like salary numbers we can move.
Yeah.
Give us Jordan Poole back.
Yeah.
And we'll eat his contract because we think we can make Jordan Poole a good player.
Right.
And that way you get Brook Lopez and you get that backup center who can play behind Looney. Right. Or it gives you another aspect. I think that's an interesting situation. I think a probably more likely situation is like, hey, we have Brook Lopez, Portland. Mm-hmm. What small forwards, wings do you guys got? Not many. Okay, give us a first. You know, like maybe you get pick assets for Brook Lopez that you then switch into the guy that you actually want.
Right.
Kind of like what I believe the Atlanta Hawks did to get Sadiq Bey, where they cashed in a bunch of second-round picks and got Sadiq Bey.
Right.
If I remember that trade correctly. But yeah, that's just the situation.
Right. Yeah. I mean, because they just need more of those kind of shooters to. I mean, against what the Heat were doing to them was, and making some of those defensive adjustments that like Brook Lopez just couldn't. You can't chase him all the way into the 3-point line and then run him back into the paint. Like he's just too old and it's hard to follow up that.
Yeah, and my last thought on this is I do think that I don't anticipate Chris Middleton getting moved as much as I think it would be a good idea, because I think Chris Middleton is just progressively going to get worse with age and his trade value is just going to go down. But I don't expect them to move Middleton, especially now that you have a new coach. They're probably going to give him the benefit of the doubt with this core and go, okay, like let's see what you can do. If we need to move guys, we'll move guys. But yeah, I don't see them. A Drew Holiday trade isn't coming, you know. Like, like they're not gonna. The Bucks have never been an overreactionary organization.
Definitely not.
Yeah, like the only arguably bad trade I can think that they've made in a while was the Brogdon salary dump, and then they want to chip the next year, right?
Yeah, so it wasn't even a bad trade.
Yeah, it wasn't even a bad trade. But I do still think it was a bad trade because. You know, you could have just won a chip and also had Malcolm Brogdon, right? But I think also something that had to do with that was like giving Brook Lopez a little bit more money, something like that. So, whatever. Moving on, though, what we should talk about alongside the future of the Bucks is who's the best player in the NBA. A lot of people would say Jokic, right? I think both of us would probably agree. I think,
But at least where I'm coming from is if I hear somebody say I think Giannis is the best player in the NBA, Jokic is number 2, I probably won't fight them on it. What say you?
Yeah, I think I would argue that Jokic is the better player, and had someone told me, no, it's Giannis XYZ for XYZ reasons, I would disagree, but it's not a bad take. Like, it's not someone walking up to me and telling me KD is the best player in the NBA. Mm-hmm. Which I just think, given his body of work over the last few years, he probably can't be considered the best player in the NBA, in my opinion. But, like, Jokic just won a chip, put up all-time offensive numbers, and at this point, outside of the Defensive Player of the Year, his resume is probably as good as Giannis. But Giannis has two-way potential,
right,
and can do 90% of the offensive stuff Jokic can do, right? So I can't really think it's a bad take.
They're just so different in their styles, and that's what makes it tricky. I think of Jokic as kind of like he's a little bit more clean, precise in his passing, maybe not the flashiest, but has a great jump shot. It's almost like a lot of the areas where Jokic excels, Giannis doesn't, and vice versa. And like Giannis is hustling all over the court, is making these crazy chase down blocks, weak side help, unbelievable defender in his own right, on ball or off ball, and that's just where Jokic isn't. At the same time, we saw what happened with Jokic team versus the Heat, and we saw what happened with Giannis team versus the Heat, and so you can really limit Giannis with having guys around him that can't shoot, and you're forcing him to just drive, and that's where his game kind of slows down. It works in the regular season where he's putting up damn near 30 a game, but if they can lock in on him in a playoff series, that's pretty tough for him to grow. Whereas with Jokic, I feel like we kind of saw in spots where they were like, okay, we're going to make you shoot it. So he goes, okay, fine, I'll go 13 to 17 or whatever from the field, and I'll live with that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that was a great breakdown. I also think Jokic, fits in more systems.
Mm-hmm.
So like when I tend to think the best player in the NBA also, like a lot of times what I think is if I stuck this guy on a random NBA team, how much would they improve? That's like one of the things that I kind of think about. I think Jokic's capacity to raise the ceiling or floor of just about any team is probably better than Giannis. Because Jokic can shoot, because Jokic now is probably an average to plus defender even, because he's a great distributor and whatnot. I think Giannis, if you've got another center who's just sitting in the paint, like clogging up the lane for Giannis, that's really going to inhibit your ability to get the most out of him. Jokic, though, we've seen him play with big men, like alongside other big men, and we've seen him play with 4 shooters, like next to him, right? So that's just my argument. I think the versatility of Jokic right now, and he just wanted chips. So I kind of want to give him the benefit of the doubt after I feel like he's been semi-disrespected. To me, he's been a top 4 player in the NBA for basically 3 years now, minimum.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah.
Well, according to Giannis' own standards, the best player in the league is the guy who just won the chip. So I think he'd give it to Jokic right now if you asked him. I think the only thing that really helps with Giannis is one, just even though he was unbelievable in those games. I think they lost in spite of how good he was playing. I think he did everything he could to help those guys. And but some of the closeout games where he's getting antsy, he's nervous with the free throw line.
And he's always been like that a little bit.
Right.
I feel like.
Right. Besides Game 6 of the 2021 Finals where he shoots 17 of 19 from the free throw line.
Build difference performance.
Yeah, that was a build difference performance.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that I'm thinking of now is we think of Jokic on the sustained path of excellence throughout the playoffs, whereas Giannis in that NBA Finals run, when he's in Phoenix, he's clanking free throws, but all of a sudden he reaches this apex where it's one of the top 5 games I've ever seen in my entire life. Whereas I don't really know if I've seen Jokic play in a game where I'd call it one of the top 5 games I've ever seen in my entire life type beat.
I feel like he had a few crazy closeout games, remember, against the Clippers back in the bubble? Or against Utah back in the bubble when it was like him and Jamal versus Donovan Mitchell. I think they had some all-time games.
For sure.
But you're right, though, it's not necessarily like
the stature.
Yeah, Jokic didn't drop a 60-point triple-double in a Western Conference Finals to win the series or something.
Right.
But he also almost was too good.
Yeah.
That's like kind of the other side of it. Like, he didn't get a chance to put up 40 points in a crazy Game 6 because his series didn't get to Game 6.
Yeah, right. Well, and thinking about that, the classic stat that's going around with the 30, 20, 10, only 3 guys in NBA history have ever done it, and Kareem and Will are the other 2. And Jokic is the one with 3 of them. Even that game, it was impressive, but there was nothing really about it where you're like, whoa, he's controlling it. Or I guess you looked at the stat line and you go, oh, damn.
Yeah, that's true. That is fair. It wasn't like the Jimmy Butler, what was it, against the Bucks where he had the 56 where you're like, oh my god, he hasn't missed.
Yeah.
But I also think that's because we take Jokic a little bit for granted.
Sure.
Jokic didn't have one bad game in these playoffs, basically. No. If you go through the game log, I think he basically had either 10 rebounds or 10 assists to go along with minimum 15 points in every single game.
Yeah.
And then if he didn't have 10 rebounds or 10 assists, he had 30 points.
We've reached the point with I think, like you're saying, maybe the argument for Giannis is if he does have a crazy Game 6 NBA Finals type game where he's just all his effort and you're just okay, anything that goes into the paint, if it's a rebound, if it's a pass, you're losing because he's just swallowing all of it up. And he does need those shooters around to kind of try to help. But man, it was unbelievable. But like you're saying, Jokic, a bad Jokic game is fine. You can get away with a pretty bad Jokic game, and chances are he's still going to be one of the top 2 players on the court.
I would almost go further to the point where I think Jokic's floor as a player on a game-to-game basis is by far the highest in the league.
Definitely.
I think we can kind of get into this now, but my personal list, and I'm biased, I would go Jokic as the best player. I'd probably put Steph at 2, and I'd probably put Giannis at 3. My argument just is I think Steph is a little bit more icy in big games than Giannis, and but the thing is, the floor with Steph is probably lower than Jokic's. You can't put him close to Jokic, in my opinion. I almost think it's Jokic in tier 1 right now, and then Steph and Giannis in tier 2. But they could easily jump up with certain performances.
Right.
But I think Steph and Giannis are both kind of in this weird spot where they had early playoff exits with coming off the back of amazing personal performances, and so it's a little bit hard to rank them. And that's why if a Warriors fan is going to tell me, oh, Steph is the best player in the league, I'm really not going to fight him too hard.
Right.
As much as I disagree. Like, as much as I truly think that Jokic is the best player right now. I also, yeah. If someone told me Luka's the best player in the league, though, we're going to have a conversation.
Then we have to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Because we're factoring in so many different angles to this. We're factoring in what's the highest floor that you have, your ability to make your other teammates better, what is your individual, like, the defensive and offensive capability as it relates independently of the team.
Recent performances, past performances, right. Your pedigree.
All that coming in. Yeah. With Luka, I mean, maybe if we want to say he can be the next best player in the NBA, like, maybe there's a place for that, but he hasn't shown that. I mean, he hasn't shown that he's able to uplift the team. His bad games, if he's having a bad game, I mean, the Mavs are damn near screwed. So, yeah.
And I think with Luka, we wouldn't argue with you if someone came to us and said Luka's going to win MVP and the Mavs are going to win the chip.
No.
I wouldn't.
I wouldn't say that.
I wouldn't grill them. Like I would be like, you're a little crazy.
Bruh.
But come a year from now, if Luka had won an MVP, okay, maybe the Mavs don't win a chip, but the Mavs make a finals. I wouldn't be like, that's not out of the realm of possibility. Yeah. But we can't, going into the season, given what we know and what we've seen, put Luka as like a top 2 guy. Again, at the end of next year, we could all be saying he's the best player in the league.
He could be, right. Yeah. With how quickly the league changes. Yeah. And I'm more laughing at the idea of them winning a chip because we got to see what they do in the offseason. If they make some good moves and then they get their real issues nailed down, which is not... We need a guy who can score. We need defense. We need rebounding. We need some size, and we need some like heart. That's what the Mavs need. If they can make that as changes, then the finals things in play. I think Luka could win MVP next year for sure.
Yeah,
they're a top 4 team in the West.
Just statistically, he's going to be so much better. Like he already is on another level statistically every year. So if they're like a top 3 seed in the West, he's just going to get the benefit of the doubt in that way.
Right.
And also, he is cracked. Like, he's different. Like, it's like... But again, we're not putting him in our top 3 now. Like...
he's on your fantasy team, so you got some decisions to make coming up.
I do. I'm keeping him, for sure.
Yeah, okay. So like, never mind.
Like,
I wasn't going to blow up your spot right there, but...
No, it's Luka, man. With that, I mean... I think Jokic is the best player in the league. Anthony?
Yeah, I'll take Jokic as the best player in the league. I'm fine with Steph too, and Giannis if you want to. If you're a Bucks fan, you're a Warriors fan, or you just love those guys, you want to argue they're the best. I won't fight you on it. But if you have Jokic lower than 2, then 2 or 3, like come on, like that's you're just hating for fun now.
I totally agree. Yeah. Last thing is also I don't think the supporting cast that Jokic has is like that much better than like the supporting cast Giannis has.
Right.
If you're thinking about it, like Middleton, Drew, and I know Middleton was hurt throughout the year, and Giannis had the injury in this series, but like Middleton, Drew, Brook Lopez, and then they just have like Bobby Portis, like Grayson Allen, like they have like players.
Yeah.
You know, these aren't like terrible guys. I think the Nuggets supporting cast is better than the Bucks, but it's not like the gap that I think everyone might think it is, and. The Nuggets beat the Heat in 5 games. The Heat beat the Bucks in 5 games. Like,
right. Well, and then, I mean, we can always say, like, that, you know, just because that equals that.
Yeah, the basketball maths don't work like that. Yeah.
The gods aren't like, this team beat this team, so this team is better than this team.
Course.
But, like you're saying, I think the one thing I would say for Jokic is that he has Jamal Murray. The season where Jamal Murray was hurt, they lose in the first round. So
the same in 5 games, the same way the Bucks just lost.
So
yeah.
So who knows? That's kind of tricky. But yeah, and I think if we are going to hold Giannis and Steph to these earlier postseason flameouts, part of my thinking about who's the best player in the league, it should be a couple of years of a shelf life, I think. Unless there's a dramatic dip or some wild thing happens. And so because of that, I can say, okay, well, Jokic did lose in the first round last year. So that can be an aspect of it for me. And then you see what happens when we get Jamal Murray, who's averaging 21, 7, and 10 in the finals and 25, 5, and 5 on damn near 50, 40, 90 splits.
Yep.
So when you have a guy like that you know you can kind of hand the reins to and say, okay, you take the next few possessions and just go crazy with it. And Jamal Murray was just picking his right spots, was really in control of the game. Even Game 4 when Jokic was close to fouling out and then Michael Malone had to sit him and he were making that comeback like you were talking about that window. And it was Jamal Murray who made a couple of big shots to keep them ahead. I don't know if the Bucks have that guy right now. Maybe Chris Middleton gets healthy. Maybe he can come back to that form, but I don't know.
I think you can argue a combo of Drew and Middleton should have been offensively as good as just one Jamal Murray.
Sure, maybe.
You could make that argument, but I just think the pieces on the Nuggets complement each other so well.
Yeah, that's and thanks to Jokic.
Yeah, and also thanks to Jamal. I mean, if we're being honest, they basically don't have a backup point. Jokic is their backup point, and they just play with either Jamal or Jokic on the court, and they're just that's it. Which, the Bucks, they'll play with a guy like Javon Carter instead of just saying Drew is our point and then Giannis is our backup point. But I don't know. The roster construction differences, I guess. With that, I think we kind of ran through that a good amount.
Yeah.
We are here for a draft, an in-person draft.
Woo-wee!
The real draft, the NBA draft of college players, is in 5 days. So we had to do a totally unrelated draft. And we just wanted to go over our favorite historical playoff matchups that never ended up happening.
The what-ifs of the world.
Yes, the what-ifs. I guess the thing is that something to keep in mind, this is not going to be like, oh, what if the Bill Russell Celtics played the Kobe Lakers? It's more like in season.
Could have happened.
Yeah, in a certain year or a certain dynasties that could have played each other and that didn't.
Yeah.
Anthony, first pick is yours. I had the last one.
Ooh, okay. So first pick of the historical what if could have been records type of draft. Could have been records. No, we're not affiliated with them.
No.
So we're not asking for their endorsement and don't put us in a lawsuit. Okay. So I'm gonna take this one. I'll go with this is an era piece, but just I would have loved to see a finals between LeBron and Kobe. So badly. So I give that window 2007 to 2012 because 2007 was when LeBron started winning them, and then he missed the finals, and then 3 straight years Kobe makes them, and then from 2011 on LeBron makes them. So a couple of things that happened that got in the way was LeBron wasn't able to beat Orlando or beat Boston, and they were in a couple of Game 7s and they had those opportunities. And then for Kobe, he couldn't beat Dirk back in 2011 when they were on their way. I think they got swept, and they were back-to-back finals. And then the other one was who knows about the Chris Paul trade getting blocked in 2012. So I think everybody and their mother wanted Kobe and LeBron, especially in that 2007 through 9 era, 2010 when they were both at their peaks respectively. That would have been so cool to see. Yeah,
that was number 1 on my list as well. Yeah. I think the year I specifically had down was 2010, the year LeBron loses to the Magic, where he still has a game, a buzzer-beating game winner in that series.
2009.
2009.
Yeah.
That's the year
the Magic played the Lakers.
Then what was 2010?
2010 was the Celtics played the Lakers, and the LeBron lost to them in 6, I think.
Really? I thought there was back-to-back Celtics-Lakers, and then there was... I thought the last year...
2008 Celtics-Lakers, 2009 Magic-Lakers, 2010 Celtics-Lakers
again. Well...
Regardless,
2009.
That shot was crazy.
But that specific season, it felt like they were on a crash course, and didn't happen. And that was the year that I specifically had down, but yeah, I agree. I thought that was my number one pick. So I get 2 picks here. There's a few different ways to go about this. I have a few matchups that I feel like we missed out because we were wronged, like in some way, shape, or form, and other ones where it just didn't happen. My first one is going to be Kings against Nets in 2002.
Ooh, okay.
And I think you can go a step further and say Kings against Celtics in 2002. So the Celtics lose to New Jersey in the Eastern Conference Finals, and the Kings lose to the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. But there was kind of a chance there for a lot of those players involved to have very different stories, and that's kind of the angle I'm going to go with this. Is that Chris Webber's career, Vlade Divac's career, etc. All these guys could have been known in such a different light, even with just a playoff finals appearance, let alone a finals win. Obviously, you have the whole refs and the Tim Donaghy situation in the Western Conference Finals that eventually comes out. And I would kind of blame the results of that series on the reffing. Some heinous, in the elimination games, heinous reffing. But on the other hand, too, you did have very tight games where it's 2002. It's an early version of the Celtics that is remembered very not fondly. That loses to the Nets in the playoffs. The Nets, who we had already seen make a finals by that point. And so that's a really interesting what if to me in terms of historic implications.
Right. Well, thinking about it, so 2002. I think that was actually the Nets' first championship.
Oh, that was their first appearance? Okay.
And then, because the second year they played against the Spurs.
They did play against the Spurs in 2000.
I do think, on that note, I'd seen an interesting video. Shout out to the guy that makes all these, what's his name? He makes all these great YouTube videos of, like, what ifs. But he had done a video talking about, what's this guy? Oh, shout out. He's Johnny Arnett on YouTube. Huge guy. I like listening to him. And he talked about that 2002 series as, like, typically, sometimes at least the best 2 teams are in the same conference. And he was saying that series specifically was whichever one of those teams was probably going to wipe the floor. But that would have been really cool to see what would have happened especially with the Kings, like Peja. Chris Webber, Mike Bibby.
Peja gets lost in history.
Totally.
And that's a guy that if he just has a chip, and he wouldn't have probably been finals MVP or something, probably. But even if he has a chip or a finals appearance, he's probably way better remembered. And also, if you beat the Lakers at that point, the peak Lakers, that takes a lot of the prestige and like the shine off of those Lakers teams. And they probably break up a year early.
Right.
Probably break up a year early. So, I don't know.
Yeah. That's a great pick.
That's my pick. Then coming back around, I get a second pick. This is... I'm not going to go with another one where I feel like we were wrong. This is just more out of historic curiosity. It's kind of like the 1998 to 1992. We missed out on a Jordan Magic NBA Finals, and it had to do with, I think Magic getting AIDS, and, that unfortunate situation and a lot of, like, the stigma that came with that, and also the Bulls just not being ready yet. The Pistons were busy making the finals in 88, 89, and before that you had the Celtics. And I really feel like we missed out on a potential all-time series. The Lakers were also still very good by the time, like, Magic left with his stuff. So
that would have been crazy because James Worthy was still there. He was still healthy. Magic Johnson was only, 32 when he retired. So he had plenty left in the tank. And obviously they're going to figure out a way to revamp. So that would have been really, really awesome to see.
And that was like a young version of the Bulls teams too. It wasn't like those 91, 92, 93 teams. That's not the 96, 95 Bulls or 97 Bulls who are winning like a ton of games. Right? It's not the 72 win Bulls.
Right.
So
man, that would have been that was great. I'll stay on your kind of role. So this potential finals appearance actually was sparked by a debate that Max and I had in one of our podcasts about who's better between Hakeem Olajuwon and Kevin Durant. And one of the points that Max had brought up when we were talking about rings was that Hakeem didn't have to play against MJ in the finals, and what would that have looked like? So I would absolutely have loved to see, so I'll take this with my second pick, MJ versus Hakeem NBA Finals, whether it's both years in a row or just at least one of them. So a couple things that we get to see is that Hakeem just wasn't really on great teams when MJ was in his first three-peat, and then during MJ's second three-peat, there were a couple chances that they had. They got pretty close, but I think Stockton hit the Rockets with a buzzer beater to send the Jazz to the finals. So we just never got to see that. So that would have been cool. There is MJ comes back in '95, plays about 17 games to close out the year, and then loses to the Magic in the second round to the Rockets beat. But like we had said earlier, just because one team beats another doesn't mean. I think it would have been interesting. I think if both of these, if they'd played back-to-back years, I think maybe the Rockets in the Bulls split. I personally think so. I think MJ goes 7-1 finals, but it really does answer the could Michael Jordan have won 8 straight conversation, and it changes the narrative because Hakeem Olajuwon is probably one of the only guys in NBA history who was drafted before an all-time great player or like a career unbelievable player, that the team that drafted him in Houston is like, yeah, we're fine. We made the right pick. Mm-hmm. That's the only guy I can really think of who got drafted ahead of somebody else. Like, I think of a guy, James Harden, 3rd overall pick, great pick. I'm sure they would have preferred to have Steph. And you can't make that same claim with Hakeem. So that's one I really wish we could have seen.
That was the one I was picking between. Okay. Like for the Bulls Magic, I was the Bulls Lakers or Bulls Rockets. I just think those Rockets teams were like a little bit worse than the peak of those Lakers teams I would have liked to see play the Bulls. That's all.
Yeah, no, totally.
That's kind of my whole opinion.
Yeah, right. I'm kind of liking this Michael Jordan, so I'll stay on this. You cover the early part of his dynasty run because it's likely that those Lakers would have been in the early 90s and would have phased out. Then I kind of talked about the middle. Now I'm going to talk about the end. So in The Last Dance, we saw that Reinsdorf wanted Phil Jackson gone, and Michael Jordan said, "Look, if he's gone, I'm gone. This is our last dance." People wonder what could have happened in 1999, and I also wonder what just happened this year. We saw an 8 seed make the finals. When was the last time we saw an 8 seed make the finals? Was in 1999. Mm-hmm. It was the New York Knicks. The Eastern Conference was packed pretty deep in that time, so I don't think there was a huge win gap between the 1 and the 8 seed. I'm so curious to see if, Michael Jordan really almost very, very rarely gave us a reason to not think that he couldn't pull through. You got to do a lot of roster reconstructor and stuff like that. Dennis Rodman was obviously out by that point. I think he played on the Lakers and was no good. But I'd be so curious to see what happens if the Bulls could make it to the finals against the Spurs in '99, where you got your young Tim Duncan, you got your late prime David Robinson, and I think the Spurs had just ripped through the Western Conference that year. So they had taken care of the Jazz, they had taken care of the Lakers, or maybe one of those teams took care of the other one, but regardless, I would have been so curious to see if Michael Jordan could have kept doing it, a la LeBron James keeping on doing it after his age 35 season. So for my third pick, I don't think it's as one that's as like historically like missed out on by many people, but I would love to see that.
Great pick. I actually did not have that on my list, but I didn't really conceptualize that.
Right.
I think it's a great pick. I love the idea of the crossing of eras. We already picked one of those that didn't happen with Kobe and LeBron, mm-hmm. and the idea of doing that with MJ, and then like the young Spurs. I guess just young Tim Duncan, actually, but
older David Robinson.
Exactly.
Give him some credit. Yeah.
Exactly. So it wasn't really a young Spurs team. But yeah, maybe Steve Kerr wouldn't have won a chip with the Spurs. My next pick actually kind of has to do with Steve Kerr. It's actually like kind of this 2004 to 2008 range where I feel like the Suns are basically a top 2 team in the West, for 4 straight years. And they have that playoff series. I believe it was against the Spurs where they're up 3-2. The guys on the Suns jump off maybe it was in Game 5.
Stoudemire?
Yeah, Stoudemire and Marion, I think, dropped off the bench.
Yeah,
and
they get the altercation.
Yeah, and they get suspended because of the rules at the time of following the Malice in the Palace.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that team was robbed of a finals appearance or even a chip because that was kind of the time the West was better.
Yeah. Oh, way better.
And I really think that these Suns teams could have competed, whether that's against the Pistons, whether that was against the Celtics,
or the Cavs.
And I think like Steve Nash, for example, is a player where we think almost what could have been. Like had he shot more threes, he would have been a lot better. But he won 2 MVPs. He just never had any playoff success to show for it.
Right.
And that to me is unfortunate, and that's kind of the more we were wronged by the NBA thing with the suspension, because I do think in that series that they win, they go on to win the chip.
Yeah, that's a great one. I hadn't even thought of that. Just some other context for it. Yeah, I don't know both Stoudemire and Marion were suspended, but I know one of them was for sure. Mm-hmm. I know they were up in the series. And I know that they had a bunch of years where they kind of were so close, and they just had such a talented core.
Yeah, and they had a talented core. Not only was the NBA kind of working against them with that thing, like their owner was working against them. Like they had Joe Johnson and just gave him up for free because they didn't want to re-sign him because they didn't want to pay money, right? And like they had to put up with an owner who didn't want to pay, and yet they were still making Western Conference Finals, still winning 60 games. And it kind of gets lost in history.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my...
That's a great...
Yeah, that's my 3rd pick. My last, my 4th pick, is going to be the 2020s Clippers and Lakers. We never got this matchup. I kind of, at the time that these teams got put together, had I known that they would never play together, I would assume that it would be one of the most disappointing lack of matchups, I guess, considering they were in the same conference, same city. Mm-hmm. These teams were put together in the same offseason. Kawhi, he was picking between the Lakers and the Clippers, according to basically the majority of reports, because he wanted to go back home, and he picks the Clippers instead of the Lakers. The Lakers going to win a chip, Clippers going to choke a few series, and we kind of don't really get a chance to see those teams play at the peak of their powers. In the moment, it felt a lot crazier when those teams got put together, and as it was rolling out, it would get hyped up like, oh, Lakers, Clippers. But it only feels like we missed out on that for a year or two, and then kind of it didn't matter as much anymore.
Right.
Kawhi was the best player in the league, arguably, when he went to the Clippers. Mm-hmm. Within a year or two, he's not in a top 4 or 5 player conversation.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of where the shine's kind of gone there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a few things we got robbed from, despite on top of what Max said. Obviously, Clippers blow that 3-1 lead. I think we speak for both of us. We don't care about the bubble haters. Bubble performance. It's an NBA game. If you're on the court, if you can play, it's an NBA game.
Yeah.
So we would have loved to see that. The Clippers have been dominating the Lakers in the regular season over the last few they've won ridiculous number of games. People were thinking that the Clippers were going to take it to the Lakers, and it was up, and then the Lakers end up winning the chip. So we got to wonder what's going to happen if these two teams face up in the playoffs. We still never got to see a Clippers-Lakers playoff matchup, which really stinks because. And another big one was the injuries. We missed 2 solid Lakers seasons of AD gets hurt in the 2-7 round matchup against the Suns. Who knows what can happen because they're up 2-1 in that series, and even though the Suns are probably a better team, if AD's fully healthy, maybe they win and they end up playing against the Clippers in the conference finals, like what happened. And then the next season, obviously, AD's out. Westbrook trade is a disaster for them. They completely missed the playoffs. So and then Kawhi and Paul George are just dealing with their own knee injuries at the same time. So I think that's a fantastic pick for sure. Would love to see that.
I guess you have 2 more picks and I have 1 more.
Yes. Okay, so I have 4 options that I'm looking at, and I want to kind of give a couple of honorable mentions just before I delve into my last 2. Mm-hmm. So a couple honorable mentions. Heat Cavs 2015. Thought would have been really cool to see. So a little bit more recent. This would have been a conference finals matchup where LeBron's first year back in Cleveland, and then the Heat without those guys.
He were performing super well up until the Chris Bosh heart injury.
And they even pushed the Raptors to a Game 7, and who went on to face the. So it would have been really cool to see, especially if there was that health. The other honorable mention I'll say is. Wait, I don't know if I'm taking away from your ones, but hopefully not.
That was one of mine, but that wasn't the one I was going to pick. Okay. But you should actually probably pick before you give the honorable mentions.
Okay, fine. I'm gonna give the okay. So my fourth pick, that's not an honorable mention. I think this would have been a really cool hypothetical. We saw the early 2010s was the super team was the Heat. The later 2010 was the Warriors. So there is a bit of an age discrepancy here. I would have absolutely loved. I always think of that one shot in the 2013-14 season where LeBron hits that crazy step back three against the Warriors.
Yes.
But he's on the Heat.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, what if LeBron says, "Screw it, I think I have enough here. Let's try to make some offseason moves. Maybe let's not push for the Heat to draft Shabazz Napier." And we got to knock on wood and say the what if games with, but. Before Bosh got hurt, he was averaging 21-7. D Wade, let's say the need isn't as bad; it's 22-5. I'm looking at this as LeBron runs it back with that revamped Heat team. Obviously, he's in the peak of his powers. Let's say Bosh and Wade are healthy. The Warriors, if we're comparing these two teams, they probably get it done. They probably win that series based off of their youth and their firepower, but. I'm thinking at the same time, they are going up against a team now that has a ton of championship experience. Whereas with the Cavs, it was kind of like LeBron was the only guy who had ever gone to the finals beforehand. And so I think that would have been really cool. And then the big thing that hurt them in the finals the year before against the Spurs was, they were right there. They just got outdueled by a team that was equally as experienced and was just playing unbelievable basketball. So I am curious to see if maybe they play the Warriors, and maybe there's like a lack of experience that the Warriors are feeling. But I don't know what would have happened, but I think that would have been so cool to see because we saw LeBron's final year with the Heat was the first year that was the final year where the Warriors were no longer that kind of like
middling team. Yeah.
So. Yeah, I'll hold off on my fifth one, but I want to hear your reaction to that.
No, I thought that was a great pick. I kind of have a bigger reaction depending on who you pick here because I have a similar idea.
Okay. Yeah. So for my final pick, and this is where Max and I have argued about this before, and I think we're about to start an argument again, which is why I wanted to maybe see what you had to say on yours. But if the Rockets.
This is what I wanted my last pick to be.
Okay. So should we hold off? Should we hold off then?
No. Go.
All right. Well. If this is your last pick, let me say my other one and then.
No, but you got your last pick. No, because I have a different. I have a different last pick.
Rockets beat the unbelievably favored Warriors in 2018. Let's say they don't miss 27 threes in a row. Let's say maybe they hit 4 of those 27 or whatever they need to get over the 2. Really, whatever the difference in the score was. This is something that we have no way of proving, but I would have loved to see LeBron James in his 2018 Cavs season sans Kyrie, with Kevin Love, with J.R. Smith, with an old Tristan, not even old, but a not great Tristan Thompson, with a George Hill, with a Kyle Korver. I would have loved to see that team go up against the Houston Rockets. And I believe that the Cleveland Cavaliers would have won their second championship if they had faced the Houston Rockets in 2018. Now, I know what people want to say. The Rockets were way better. The Rockets were a fantastic team. You got James Harden. You got Chris Paul. You got all these shooters around you. They are ready to go out and dominate, and I totally get that. Where I falter is, I think that LeBron was on such a level that for me, the mentality aspect of being able to realize, wait, I don't have to play the Warriors? Okay, this is totally manageable. We've seen LeBron in the past beat teams that were favored to win against him. And I just think that there's a huge difference of playing James Harden and Chris Paul, and in my mind, you can kind of neutralize the rest of the guys versus you got KD, Draymond, Steph, and Clay. I think this is a series that I would have been so intrigued to see what could have happened, because you either got James Harden winning his first ring and Chris Paul winning his first ring, or you got a very, very surprising and shocking 2018 Cavs with probably the worst ever championship team to go on this crazy run that would have capped off an unbelievable 2018 playoff run for LeBron. So I'll even take away my I believe XYZ aspect would have happened from it, but I would have loved to see that finals.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree. It would have been great. Also would have given LeBron probably a better chance to win another chip, because I didn't think he was beating the Warriors, no. Right? But yeah, that's kind of. Yeah, I totally agree. It's a great debate. That was gonna be my pick, but the reason I didn't say don't mention your last pick yet is my actual last pick is the 2013 playoffs, Western Conference semifinals. The Spurs beat the Warriors. This is a super young version of the Warriors, and it's in 6 games.
Yep.
Game 1 actually goes to double overtime where Manu Ginobili hits a game-winning 3.
Crazy shot.
The Warriors at this time are probably not the better team, but are super well able to match up against the Spurs in their play style. And I really think if that series goes differently, maybe you see a way longer Warriors title reign. Maybe you see the Warriors also, because what happens, they lose that series. They actually come back and lose again in the next year in a Game 7 against the Clippers. Mm-hmm. And then finally, when they move Mark Jackson against Steve Kerr, that's when they actually start winning finals. Who's to say that maybe if they get through that series in 2013, they're not more able to make a finals / win a finals in 2014, which the Spurs ended up doing. The Spurs beat the Warriors. They lose to the Heat in the 2013 finals. They beat the Heat in the 2014 finals. Maybe that is the avenue that might have been more realistic to get a Heat LeBron versus Warriors Steph matchup that we never got. And that was why I thought it was so interesting, and I was like, hold off on your reaction. I was going to hold off on my reaction for your pick 4, is because you went the other way where had LeBron stayed. But I was like, but what if this series that went to Game 6 with basically one of the deciding games being Game 1 going to double OT, if that had gone just a slightly different, maybe we see this whole thing a lot differently. Right. But also maybe the Heat now win in 2013 and win in 2014.
Right.
And now maybe LeBron doesn't leave.
Yeah.
And then you get all that. So, and maybe Mark Jackson is still coach of the Warriors.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's a bunch of little ideas that I had off the top of my head. But yeah.
Damn. Yeah. Whole different angle of it. I think in those series, I do think that the Heat would have probably taken care of those early Warriors teams, no problem. But that would have been super fun to see.
But I do think the 2014 Warriors probably would have beat the 2014 Heat. I think the 2014 Heat were underratedly just beat up. I think that was one of the reasons LeBron ended up leaving. As much as we like to say, and I think this too, the Heat were still a good team when LeBron left. They also were missing a lot of games injury-wise, regular season. LeBron had a ton of pressure on him. So that's why I think that would be a good fit for LeBron.
Yeah.
Cool. I guess we hit it on the head with the draft. Last thing, we did get some breaking news while recording this, and to be honest, there'll probably be more news about this by the time you hear this. But finalists for Bradley Beal allegedly are the Miami Heat and who's the other team?
And the Phoenix Suns.
And the Phoenix Suns. Personally, I kind of view this as a little bit of a smokescreen. Because the Phoenix Suns are involved after the KD trade. I don't really know what they have to trade, to be honest. But I do think it's very, very, very possible that Bradley Beal's on the Miami Heat next year. And again, like we talked about earlier in the podcast, I think it would be a great fit. So, yeah.
Would be a crazy, crazy good fit with Miami.
Yeah.
It would be unbelievable. Not as sure about the Suns. I feel like their issue wasn't that they couldn't. Their issue was not that they didn't have great wing players. It was that they didn't have depth and they didn't have great defense.
Yeah.
And that's so. I don't know. I don't know if let's say you put Beal onto this team for who. First off, let's say who are we taking off of the Suns?
The Suns.
They don't have picks, right? So
just you got to think it's basically everyone not named KD.
Chris Paul or DeAndre Ayton.
Probably,
right?
I feel like it's both.
So then you got So we take off Chris Paul. We take off Ayton. So now we're doing a starting lineup with like Cameron Payne and then we have Book, Beal, Durant, crazy wing depth,
and Jock Landale.
And then Jock Landale.
And obviously they would have a mid-level exception. They
right.
could bring someone in. I assume they would be able to get a better rotation than just that.
Yeah.
But even if it is Ayton and CP going the other way, that's not enough.
Yeah.
At that point, you might as well just sit on Brad Beal.
Right. Exactly.
So.
The Suns weren't able to overcome the Nuggets because of lack of shot making from their stars. Like
lack of depth.
They had that. It was the lack of depth.
Exactly.
So Bradley Beal is one guy. So and they were faltering in a few areas. So I don't know. Maybe if that's part of some bigger trade package, that'd be kind of interesting. But I think that, like you mentioned this earlier with the Bradley Beal and the Heat, that'd be very, very good for their culture.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like it's got to be, if that's the rumor, there has to be a 3-team trade. But what team's giving up assets right now for DeAndre Ayton or Chris Paul? Like, significant enough assets for you to then flip them for Bradley Beal.
You gotta wonder if DeAndre Ayton's in a place where he just needs a change of scenery.
And I think we agree, but...
Right. And so maybe a team is, like, willing to kind of go for that, but
are you giving up, like, the rumored asking price, right, for, like, OG Anunoby, who's, like, a 3-and-D defender on the Raptors, potentially undervalued on a contract where he's going to have to re-sign next year, but you don't have the max yet. Like, the rumored asking price for him is 3 firsts. Even if Ayton's going for 3 firsts, you can't flip 3 firsts for Brad Beal.
Right.
And then you also have to match Brad Beal's contract. You're going to do what? Chris Paul and Cameron Payne and 3 firsts for Brad Beal? Like, are the Wizards saying yes to that?
Now I'm thinking about the Suns. Man, maybe I get rid of Ayton for those 3 firsts, and then I used my 3 firsts to go get Anunoby.
Yeah, no, but that's something that's like actually realistic though. Like, that's why I can't believe. If the Suns' name has been floated out for a guy like Anunoby or even like in a sign-and trade like Van Fleet, if you haven't heard anything about the Suns there, why are we hearing about them with the Brad Beal stuff?
Right.
Kind of makes me think potential Wizards smokescreen.
Could be, yeah.
Maybe drive the ice cream price up a little bit more higher
for Bradley Beal.
Yeah, because I assume Brad Beal, as much as he has the no trade clause, he's not going to say no to a trade just because too much stuff is going the other way. Also, like ego wise, if you get traded for 8 firsts, you're now valued as the guy who got traded for 8 firsts. And when your contract comes up in 4 years, they're going to want to re-sign you because guess what? They paid 8 firsts for you. It's like. Again, the whole Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler thing. Yeah. Tobias Harris got traded for 2 firsts. Philly gave up 2 firsts. They only gave up 1 for Jimmy. You know, who was the better player? Jimmy. But they felt like they had a bigger investment in Tobias.
Right. Well, so, it's the what's the dead weight or the
sunk cost fallacy. Exactly.
It's unbelievably stupid.
But in the NBA, it holds so true.
But it holds true, which is. This is a different conversation. I think that's a poor philosophy to have.
We agree.
It makes so much sense. I was thinking the similar thing with Zion. He has so much potential, of course. If the assumption is that he's not going to be able to be healthy, it's sunk cost. It's a fallacy. You got to move on. You got to get screwed. Like with Bradley Beal. I mean, or like with Tobias Harris. Like you want to save face in this news cycle of 24 hours where a team is just getting absolutely obliterated for. Maybe there's some politics because we see coaches getting fired and stuff like that, but there's almost this mentality of you gotta get the wheels turning super, super quick. It's okay to say we messed up with this Tobias Harris idea. Let's stick with the guy that's better. We have Jimmy Butler. Why wouldn't we want to keep him instead of going and getting Josh Richardson and a pick or something ridiculous for that? Like, It's okay to admit that you made a mistake and then move on in a productive way because nobody's going to care about that anymore. We don't think about the teams that went on to have success. We don't worry about, their assets that they lost or whatever the case may be.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I think you're completely correct with that. I think, but in the NBA where people's jobs are on the line and perception is kind of the key to keeping your job if you're a GM. A lot of times perception will always out-trump the actual sunk cost stuff. Because if I'm the guy who's been building around Trae Young for the last 4 years and I got hired to do that, if I trade Trae Young and then I mess up, I'm getting fired, right? Even if trading Trae Young might have been the right move.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyways, with that, I think this concludes our first full episode of being in person with you guys. I think our actual camera died, so you're gonna see us from like this bigger, wider camera angle for the back end of this podcast.
What's up, y'all?
And hopefully the switching the camera angles is fine, and you guys aren't getting nauseous. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for listening, y'all. And we'll probably we'll try to get some more content in person out to y'all soon. So we'll be Spittin Hoops until then.
Peace out.
Peace.